Good evening. It's Thursday, December 15th. I'm Aryeh O'Sullivan, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. The residents of Amona have rejected an offer to keep them on the same hilltop in exchange for agreeing to a voluntary evacuation of the present illegal outpost, describing the offer as so full of holes it was like Swiss cheese. Speaking at a press conference today, residents said they received messages that their evacuation will be delayed and won't take place before next week. They said they still expect the political echelon to come up with a better plan. The compromise had been offered by Jewish Home Chairman Naftali Bennett in the hope of avoiding violence when the outpost is demolished. After 10 hours of deliberations yesterday, the residents decided by a clear majority to reject the offer, saying the state was unable to guarantee that permanent homes would be built for them on the hilltop. Bennett had previously warned the residents that if they said no, they would have no choice but to leave the hilltop altogether. The demolition of the outpost on private Palestinian land must now take place by no later than the 25th of December. Meanwhile, many people arrived at the Amona outpost with the aim of helping the residents prevent the demolition. The group has already erected makeshift fortifications in preparations for a confrontation with security forces. In a phone interview with IBA's Elon Hassan Levy today, Amona resident Eli Greenberg said the residents have not ruled out the possibility of a violent face-off with officers when the outpost is demolished. Greenberg was asked why residents rejected the compromise.
Right now, the compromise that was offered to us had holes more than a Swiss cheese. What the government representatives spoke to us orally was one, and what they wrote on paper was different. We were promised all families of Amona, more than 40 families, on properties over 67 dunams. When we got the offer in writing, we had 11 families on 6 dunams. The truth is in the small details, and basically nobody even ever granted us a guarantee and vouched for the proposal.
Eli, the compromise might not be perfect, but it allows you to stay on the hilltop despite the court-ordered demolition. Why not accept it nevertheless?
11 families out of 40 is 25% of the community. It essentially means dismantling the community of Amona.
The High Court has ordered after multiple appeals that the outpost be demolished. Are you going to resist this?
We're simply saying the government is going to evacuate us over technicalities. Technicalities can be handled with Prime Minister Bennett, who waved the flag of we have a solution for the residents of Amona on the hilltop. This was the part one of the deal that he cut with Prime Minister Netanyahu. We tell him now, go into the details, sit with us, and find a real solution.
If the evacuation happens by Hanukkah, are the residents going to resist with force?
We simply cannot forecast a situation where people are being kicked out of their place.
Will the residents resist with violence?
And lives. When you inflict pain on people and you mutilate
Eli,
the lives
will the
of
residents
children,
react with violence?
I cannot really tell you that. We don't really know.
Are you willing to guarantee that you will not personally raise a finger against Israeli police?
I will not answer that. Are they willing to guarantee that they have a solution for me?
So no answer then on using violence against the police?
There is no answer of finding a solution for the residents of Amona.
Nisan Slomiansky has been outed as the Jewish Home MK, accused by a party activist of conducting a series of sexual offenses against women. After meeting with a group of leading rabbis, Slomiansky issued a statement denying all claims against him, saying that he never sexually assaulted women and that his unusual friendly behavior towards women may have been misinterpreted. The MK added he has no intentions to discontinue his service in the Knesset. Fellow Jewish Home MK Shuli Mualim called on Slomiansky to suspend himself from the Knesset until clarifications of the allegations. Mualim told Israel Radio that there is no place in public leadership positions for people who commit sexual assault. She added that one of the rabbis who met Slomiansky described the allegations as grave. MKs from across the political spectrum reacted to the affair.
think that what's been happening in Israeli society is that women aren't willing to be quiet or to ignore anymore sexual harassments or sexual assaults. And what we've been seeing over the past few months is that finally also in modern orthodoxy or in the Zionist Orthodox movement, women are also starting to stop these situations.
Genuine, sincere leadership means receiving trust from the people, and that means that a person has to completely take responsibility for any kind of suspicion on his name, and therefore I think the most important thing to protect the prestige and the honor of the Israeli parliament it deserves is that Mr. Slumyansky should take a recess, a break, and do what he can to come back with a clean name and to continue doing the good work he's been doing for so many years in the Knesset.
The head of the Army's Personnel Directorate, Major General Hagai Topolansky, has today stepped down from his post following the theft of an Army laptop, which possibly contains classified information from his home earlier this week. In announcing his resignation, Topolansky said he was taught to take responsibility for his actions. IDF Chief of General Staff Gadi Eisenkot said he accepted Topolansky's decision with a heavy heart and expressed deep admiration for the senior officer. Topolansky's deputy, Brigadier General Mirav Krishner, will take over as acting head of the Personnel Directorate until a replacement is found. The burglary happened Tuesday morning when thieves broke into several homes in Be'er Tuvia, including that of the general. The IDF's Criminal Investigation Division is looking into whether any classified information was stolen owing to a violation of protocol, and would need to be eventually decided whether to accept his resignation or push for a court-martial. Israel is the poorest country among members of nations of the OECD. This according to the latest National Insurance Institute annual poverty report released today. The report states that over 1.7 million Israelis, or nearly 22% of the population, are living in poverty. The findings presented show that while the overall poverty rate declined slightly, the poor became poorer. The report raised the level of income needed to qualify for poverty in line with a general increase in living standards across the country. The poverty rate among members of the ultra-Orthodox sector decreased by 5% from 54 to 49, while the poverty rate in the Arab sector has gone up by 1% and now stands at just over 53%. However, the official figures represent a more optimistic picture than the recent alternative poverty report by an NGO Latet, which earlier this week cited a higher rate of poverty, claiming that 29% of Israelis are in poverty. That's 7% more than this report. The Director General of the Prime Minister's Office, Eli Groner, blasted the alternative report, saying the true figures show that the poverty rate has fallen and living standards have risen. In Jerusalem, police and border police staged a raid overnight in the Arab neighborhoods of Silwan, Atur, and Isawiya, and arrested 24 suspects involved in terrorist activity, riots, possession of legal weapons, and incitement. 9 of the 24 suspects are minors, and all are being questioned by police until charges are filed against them. IDF forces and Shin Bet agents also launched raids in Judea overnight and confiscated equipment used to manufacture weapons, as well as a number of weapons. So far, IDF forces have confiscated 424 weapons and 39 weapons-making installations this year. 5 years in prison. That's a sentence handed down today to the female terrorist who planned to carry out a stabbing attack in Jerusalem with a screwdriver last year. The 29-year-old woman, Atiya Abu Aisha, from East Jerusalem, was employed at a sewing factory for military equipment in Jerusalem's Atirot neighborhood. She was arrested on the capital's Jaffa Street after raising the suspicion of a policewoman in the area. She was discovered to be carrying a large screwdriver and admitted she had planned to carry out a stabbing attack. Hamas marked 29 years since its founding with a festive parade involving hundreds of gunmen and children dressed as gunmen. The masked men traveled on a convoy of pickup trucks with loudspeakers blaring Hamas slogans through the streets. They were accompanied by hundreds of operatives marching with rifles and rockets and RPGs, past signs in Hebrew and Arabic warning, "We're coming for you underground," in reference to the cross-border tunnels. Hamas was founded in 1987 during the First Intifada as an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood and has governed Gaza as a separate enclave since 2007 when it seized control in a violent coup. Turning to Syria, where the evacuation of civilians from the last parts of the rebel-held city of Aleppo is said to finally be underway. According to Reuters, at least 17 buses and ambulances drove out of the besieged city, carrying those evacuated as part of a ceasefire deal. Some 4,000 rebels and their families are slated to be taken to the rebel-held Idlib province. Shelling in the city had reportedly stopped at midnight as a new ceasefire came into effect. The evacuation of the eastern part of Aleppo means that Assad's Syrian army, backed by the Russian and Shiite militias from Iran, Iraq, and Lebanon, have regained control over the entire city, once the largest in the country. 10 days before Hanukkah, U.S. President Barack Obama hosted his final menorah lighting ceremonies in the White House East Room last night. In the evening, the president lit a menorah brought to Washington by Jaime Perez, son of the late 9th president, which is a family heirloom, and Obama paid tribute to the late statesman, saying he hoped the audience would draw strength from the divine spark of Shimon Peres, whose miraculous life taught us that faith and moral vision can triumph over all adversity. Peres' memory, he said, should inspire all to rededicate themselves to key freedoms for which American Jews have been outspoken advocates.
It's easy sometimes to take these fundamental freedoms for granted, but they too are miraculous. They too have to be nurtured and safeguarded. And it's in defense of these ideals, precisely because the Jewish people have known oppression, that throughout our history this community has been at the forefront of every fight for freedom. It's why Jews marched in Selma, why they mobilized after Stonewall, why synagogues have opened their doors to refugees, why Jewish leaders have spoken out against all forms of hatred. And in my last months in office, I want to thank you for all your courage and your conviction and your outspokenness.
After resolving the weeks-long dispute with its pilots, El Al is planning a $1 billion-plus overhaul in its aging fleet in a bid to draw back customers who have abandoned it due to the recent flight disruptions, as well as the availability of competitive budget airlines. Next year, the national carrier will receive the first of 15 787 Dreamliner planes and a $1.25 billion deal, promising more modern facilities and greater fuel efficiency. At present, the average age of El Al's long-haul planes is 19 years, compared to just 4 years for its best competitor, Turkish Airlines. Despite making a record profit of over $100 million last year, El Al has gone from a market share of 50% to just a third since its privatization a decade ago, and its share price continues to decline. Turning to medical innovation, an Israeli biotech company, Bonus Bio Group, has successfully managed to inject semi-liquid bone graft that was grown in its labs into the jaws of 11 people with the aim of repairing bone loss. The material is grown in the lab from each patient's own fat cells and was injected into filled a void in the problematic bones, and over a few months the material hardened and merged with the existing bone to complete the jaw. Company founder said that this is the first time in the world that reconstruction of deficient or damaged bone tissue is achievable by growing viable human bone graft in the laboratory and transplanting it back into the patient in a minimally invasive surgery via injection.
What we are announcing to the world is that a real success in our clinical study in regenerating new bone, regenerating bone in maxillofacial site in the jaws. It was 100% successful in all 11 patients, and all 11 patients got their dental implants after a few weeks and a few months. The patient have a full rigid dense bone of his own. It's a live, what we inject is a live bone. This is the first time ever that has been done.
Over the space of a year and a half, Jerusalem has gone from recycling close to none of its waste to half of it, thanks to a cutting-edge waste separation plant, where Elan Aslan-Levy went to explore. Caution advised, viewers might not want to be eating while they watch this report.
This is Jerusalem's garbage. A year and a half ago, all of it used to go to landfill. Now, over half is recycled.
Let's take a look behind the scenes at Israel's recycling revolution.
The GreenNet waste separation plant in Jerusalem's Atarot Industrial Park is among the largest in the world and the most technologically sophisticated. 1,500 tons of garbage arrive here every day and are separated into different materials for recycling in 5 minutes flat. Here's how it works. Every day, the Jerusalem metropolitan area collects 250 trucks full of garbage and pays GreenNet to take it off its hands for less than the cost of sending it to landfill. First, the trucks arrive and are weighed before tipping the garbage into an 8-meter deep pit. That waste is then transferred using a huge claw onto a conveyor belt, all operated by just one employee with a joystick. And it doesn't smell too bad in here, because a huge air ventilator circulates the rancid air 6 times an hour. That waste enters a machine with spikes to rip the bags open and enters this monster, the trommel. Here, the revolving drum sifts the waste by size, dropping it onto further conveyor belts through different sized holes. Magnets pick up the metals, and special optical sensors then work out what the rest of the rubbish is, using puffs of air to blow plastics and paper off the conveyor and onto the right path. Only 5 minutes after entering the facility, the waste is separated into metals, plastics and paper, packed up and loaded onto trucks to be sent to recycling plants, mostly abroad because Israeli facilities can't cope with the dramatic increase in recyclable material. The municipality saves money on landfill costs, Greenet makes some business, and the environment is all the cleaner. This plant, owned by the Yacovi brothers YSB Group, was opened last year at a cost of 85 million shekels. It's not yet profitable. For that, it needs to increase the percentage of the waste it salvages to sell to recycling plants. Greenet is aiming for 0% waste, which means building a waste-to-energy plant, although that's a way off. CEO Ofer Bogin also hopes to build more facilities in Israel.
Why doesn't every city in Israel set up a plant like this?
Basically, bureaucracy. We are the first one. Everyone now see the advantage. I assume that it's a process. It will take a few years, but several other plants will be built in Israel.
Smelling like the inside of a garbage bag, this is Eilon Aslan-Levy for IBA News.
In local money matters, shares were down across the board in the end of the week trading on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, while the shekel was mixed in foreign currency trading. Here are the numbers. Looking at the weather, it will be partly cloudy with rain showers expected in the north and the center of the country over the weekend. Here are the expected highs and lows at home and abroad for the next 24 hours. That's our broadcast for today. We'll be back again on Sunday with all the latest news from Israel. Please join us. Until then, have a great weekend and Shabbat Shalom from Jerusalem.